Greetings, this is Ralph, and in this video I'm going to talk about life lessons, growing old while moving ahead, and talk about what I describe as the 2020 rule. And what's happened in my life here is I lost both parents within the last year and a half. Year and a half ago, my mom passed of Alzheimer's disease at the age of 92. And just this last Saturday, my father passed away. He suffered from dementia, and he also suffered from congestive heart failure. Came down with pneumonia, and that took him within about 3 or 4 days, so it took him pretty fast. But I've been pondering life lessons, kind of looking back at the aging process, how we tend to adjust to the aging process, and some common, mistakes, or at least I consider them to be mistakes, some common things that we do as we grow older. And of course, one thing that we definitely do is we tend to get stuck in our ways. We tend to get, prejudiced about, not really people or things, although that's definitely a pitfall we can fall into as well. But we become prejudiced against new things. We think that, you know, your own experience was enough to get you through, in my mom and dad's example, their life history, their life experience was enough to get them through the 1920s and the 1940s and the 1950s. But when it came to advancing creatively into the 21st century, they didn't have a clue. I mean, they hated cell phones, they hated computers, they hated much of modern technology, and they just could not handle changes in technology very well, and life changes in particular, because they got old and stuck in their ways. And what I find, look at myself and the things that I'm doing, I am tending to do similar things. It's like in my dad's life. He thought big band music was as good as music would ever be. It was as good as music should ever be. It was like Glenn Miller was, the number one recording artist and musician and band leader. And, when Glenn Miller died, music died. And of course, my generation, people younger than I by about 10 years, had the same feeling when it came to Buddy Holly. My generation, it was kind of like John Lennon when he died. That was the day the music died. And just kind of looking back at my own attitudes, I mean, I thought it was funny listening to Dad talk about Glenn Miller and music, and, Glenn Miller Band was as good as it would ever get. And if I look honestly at myself and my own attitudes, I'm pretty much the same way when it comes to the Beatles. I mean, that's the pinnacle of rock and roll right there, the Beatles. And boy, when they broke up, music just took a major, major hit, and things will never be the same. But of course, if we're honest, we realize that there's a lot of interesting and very exciting advances in the world of music, since the days of Glenn Miller, since the days of the Beatles, even since the days of Hootie and the Blowfish, before they broke up. A lot of interesting developments. And I mean, I realize now I don't have to love every musical style out there. Like, I hate country western music. I hate rap. But, I mean, there are some very good artists out there in both those fields. Darius Rucker, lead singer, Hootie and the Blowfish. Loved him with Hootie and the Blowfish. When he started doing country, that was the first time that I really started listening to country music. Not because I liked the genre, but because I liked the artist. And I realized, hey, he's taking his music in a different direction. a lot of similarities with the music that he's recording as a country western artist compared to the music he did, with Hootie and the Blowfish. But, taking it in a different direction. And it's good. It's good music. Nothing wrong with it. And even though I may not like that genre, I have to say, as an artist, Darius Rucker, in my opinion, is outstanding, whether it's, Hold My Hand or some of his more recent, country western songs. He's a great artist and just a great human being. Love his work. And so, as we grow older, whether you happen to be 20-something or 30-something or 50 or 80, we have to really pay attention to this human tendency that we all have, and that is the tendency to get stuck in a rut. Have that tendency that as we grow older, things are not going to be the way they were when we grew up, nor should they be. It would be nice if the world did not move ahead at the fast pace at which it is, but we have to face reality. Life growing up in the 1950s and 1960s is nothing like life was growing up if you grew up in the 80s and the 90s. And if you're growing up, in the early days of the 21st century, and you're seeking advice from somebody who grew up and prospered in business back in the 1950s, yeah, you probably need to be careful. Expand your roadmap. Pay attention to people that are of your generation, but also pay attention to people who are more advanced than you, and also pay attention to people who are younger than you. This is getting into what I'm going to call the 2020 rule. One piece of advice for growing older while also moving ahead. You see, we tend to form friendships with people who are of our generation. People our own age. We share a lot of the same history with people like that. I grew up in the 60s and 70s, so I can remember the Kennedy assassination and the Apollo 11 moon landing, and it's pretty neat when I'm able to network and have friendships with people who also share those memories and were raised with similar attitudes. Naturally, we feel like we want to connect with people who are similar to ourselves. But the problem with just having friends who are your age, your generation, is that there is going to come a point in time where your friends are going to start dying. And it's a sad stage of life to get into. I saw this with my uncle. Back when he was in his 60s, he would sit down and open the morning paper. First thing he would look at would be the obituaries. I thought that was kind of interesting. I asked him, why do you always read the obituary first thing in the morning? Why don't you read the comics? Why don't you look at the front page? And he said, Ralph, I've gotten to that point in life where a lot of my friends have begun to die. And so every morning I open up the obituaries to find out which of my friends have died and how many friends do I have left. And yeah, that is kind of a sad stage to get to in life. But my uncle also saw the wisdom in cultivating friendships with younger people. And that's where the first part of the 2020 rule is coming into play in this video. Focus not only on having friends who are your age and of your generation, because, yeah, those friends you're going to have a lot in common with, but also focus on cultivating friendships with people who are of a younger generation, like maybe 20 years younger than you, or at least 10 years younger than you. If you can find people that you find interesting who are 30 years younger, 40 years younger. Hey, cultivate those friendships too. But the wisdom in that is that as you grow older, as you get into your 60s and your 70s, and even if you should get up into your 80s and 90s or live to be 110, your old friends will start to drop like flies. There's no way around that. It's just the nature of impermanence. The aging process, it's nobody gets off this planet alive. And that's just the way it is. And if you have friends who are just your age and older, then you may get to the point in life where it just seems like all your friends are gone. All your friends have died. I've heard old people in a church I used to minister in speak this way. And I mean, it's really a sad point to get to in your life, in your mind, in your personal relationships, because there's no way to go back. There's no way to go back and do it over. It's like you've made your lot, you've outlived all your friends, and all you have to look forward to is death itself. And that's just the way that mindset develops. You become so focused, so fixated on deterioration and death that that's all you see. But when you have friends who are 20 years younger than you, you don't have that same fixation on decay and death and destruction. You also get a focus on growth, rebirth, renewal, and you get to have a fuller view of life. And when you have friends who are 30 years younger than you, again, that your focus tends to shift, at least when they're around, away from deterioration and death to life, renewal, rebirth, and it allows you to become a more balanced human being. So in your personal friendships, this is something that I'm learning, something that I am implementing in my life. Don't discount people who are a generation or two younger than you. Don't write them off as mere kids that don't know anything. These kids can share with you a lot of life experience that you thought was in your past. And you, with the wisdom of years, if you've learned as you have grown older in life, if you have cultivated the wisdom of years, you have your wisdom that you can share with them. And, it's just a two-way street. They have their youth and their vitality and their current knowledge that you can borrow from them, and you have the wisdom of years that you can lend to them. So, it's just like every friendship should be, a growth experience for both sides. So yeah, cultivate those friendships, not only with people who are of your generation, but also focus on becoming friendly and cultivating friendships with people who are, 20 years younger. Now, in business, this is where growing older and moving ahead comes in. In business, I think what we need to do is not just focus again on people who are our own age, of our own generation, but focus on learning from people who are 20 years more advanced than us. And sometimes 20 years more advanced, that can mean that they're 20 years older. Sometimes, we can find people who are 20 years younger, who are also 20 years more advanced in a certain field than what we are. For myself, at the age of, 56, 57, going to be 57, I find modern technology, computers. I've learned computers pretty well. I don't write code. I think that would be a good thing for me to learn, though, writing coding. And I'm very, very weak when it comes to tablets, smartphones, Androids, things like that. I do tend to get stuck in a rut. It's not just the Beatles where I get stuck in a rut. It's, desktop computers. I got my first desktop computer, about 2001, 2002. I got a late start on that rodeo. But I tended to just stick with the desktop. And, now, I've gotten into laptops. I've gotten into Android phones, but, I tend to just focus on what I like. And I do realize I need to challenge myself to grow and to move ahead more with this modern technology because I realize it's been changing fast since the 1990s to now, and it's the rate of change is going to become even more rapid. And if you don't keep up with it, you're just going to get to the point where you get left behind, kind of like a 70, 80-year-old man that's outlived all of his friends. There's just no going back and doing a do-over. You can make subtle changes to your life to minimize the effect of isolating yourself in the past, but the best way to avoid getting isolated in the past is by keeping up with the changes, keeping up with the present day, and looking ahead to the future, whether you're 20 or 110. And that's the challenge that I'm laying down for myself. But yeah, when it comes to myself, trying to learn from people who are 20 years more advanced in computers and electronics and programming, I'm finding that a lot of times those are the 40 and 30-year-old people, the kids, as I used to call them, who, you know, can be really great teachers when it comes to this modern technology. And I, on the other hand, can be a good teacher when it comes to other things, like, the wisdom of the years type of things. And there are some things that I've picked up on in the world of electronics and computers that some 30 and 40-year-olds haven't heard of yet. So, yeah, it's it's a good basis, not just for friendships, but also for professional relationships. And sometimes, too, if you're wanting to learn about stocks and bonds and trading, then, looking for somebody who is 20 years older than you might be the right choice. Somebody like Warren Buffett, who got started out in the 1940s. He's got a lot of wisdom. He's kept up with the times. He's maybe not the best when it comes to Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, but when it comes to stocks and bonds and investments, uh, yeah, there's just no dispute. He is the king of that realm. And if you have the chance to listen to and learn from Warren Buffett, don't discount him because he's an old fogey. He's a master at what he does, and he has a lot of things to teach. So professionally, I'm open to learning from young and old alike, but I pay particular emphasis to people who are 20 years more advanced than I am. And that may mean somebody that's 20 years older. It can also mean somebody that's 30 years younger. There's no hard and fast rule on that. And when it comes to friendships, I tend to focus anymore. Now I am becoming more focused on cultivating relationships with people who are, 20 years younger, even 30 years younger. And yeah, it can be hard. One one experience I had that really blew my mind was when I was working at a Walmart store. And I was talking to this young lady who was in her 20s, and also was talking with a coworker at the same time who was my age, and we were talking about old television, and somehow I raised the topic of Gilligan's Island, and me and this other 50-year-old lady were talking about Gilligan's Island and remembering, yeah, wasn't that great? And this 20-year-old lady was listening, and she just asked me point blank, "What's Gilligan's Island? What was that show?" She had no idea. And I was so far removed from where she was and the television of the modern or contemporary era, that I did not know what to compare it to. And then, another one of my younger friends who was in his 20s who knew Gilligan's Island and the current TV shows, he just said, well, it's kind of like Survivor, only it was a funnier version of Survivor, more of a comedy. And she took that explanation and thought, oh, and I considered that and I thought, yeah, exactly. Yeah, Gilligan's Island, pretty much like Survivor, except no one got voted off the island. They tried to get off the island, but nobody got voted off of it. So, cultivating friendships with younger people, it will have its challenges, yes, but those challenges are also going to be opportunities for growth. Because, yeah, you will be gaining an invaluable, extremely valuable opportunity to see life through younger eyes and to be able to cultivate a younger attitude. So rather than just getting old and stuck in our ways, and this can happen at any age. I've run across people half my age who are very old and stuck in their own attitudes. But rather than allowing ourselves to get old and stuck in our ways, we can look at people that are younger and are still pursuing their dreams and share that energy and gain some valuable insight from them. And we in turn can share with them our wisdom, our insights, and focusing like that on just a broad spectrum of individuals, folks 20 years younger, folks your own age, folks 20 years older and 20 years more advanced. You will get the totality of human existence, in your face every day of your life if we focus only on our own generation. Then all we have left by the time you get 60, 70, 80 is death and decay, because you'll just be locking yourself into that station of life where all your friends are gone and you're just waiting for death yourself. And that's a sad station of life to get to. My uncle avoided that by cultivating personal and professional friendships with people who were 20 years and 30 years younger than himself, and he didn't treat them like kids. He treated them as equals. And they didn't treat him as some crazy old man either. He got to be a little, odd in his ways. Eccentric is the word I'm looking for. He definitely got eccentric. But he had a way about him that just demanded respect. And people respected him. People his age, people younger than he. I mean, he was just quite the individual. And he was always focusing on growing and moving ahead. And that's where my focus needs to be. Growing and moving ahead. If we're not busy being born, as Bob Dylan used to say, we are busy dying. And I've seen these words, play out all around me throughout my life in the last 57, 56 years. And that's something that I am now learning from and changing my focus. The 2020 rule. Cultivate friendships with people a generation younger and learn professionally from people who are 20 years more advanced. Sometimes the two will overlap, like in the field of technology, AI, computers, that sort of thing. People who are 20 years more advanced than you may also be 20 years younger than you. But, also if you're interested in stocks, bonds, trading, yeah, don't discount the Warren Buffetts and the 70 and 80-year-olds and 90-year-olds that are out there that are still sharp and still at the top of their game. Learn from them too. Don't let age be a barrier. Cultivate the whole spectrum of human life within your own life. And even if you are at the end of your game, or you think you're at the end of your own personal life, it's not too late. If you have the humility to be able to reach out to younger people, do it. If you have the humility to learn from people that you thought were like kids, you can do it. And kids, have the humility, have the grace to be able to accept that, yeah, sometimes people are older and wiser, and take advantage of that. So, 2020 rule. I'm going to leave with that because I think I'm just starting to drone on here. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to subscribe, be sure to do that too. And until later, this is Ralph signing off. Catch you in the next video. Thanks for dropping by.